Many years ago, Wizened Owl learned of a highly secret military operation that took place during the Second World War. The only information given was that an air corridor was created to enable the RAF to assist in convoy protection, and that was it. There was little other information available on the subject, as it had apparently not then been declassified. Even now, much of the original material is so obscure it's close to impossible to gain any real detailed information, as we'll see. Despite managing to get some hard evidence over the last 10 years, it is only now that I've been able to complete a reasonably accurate presentation of what is often referred to as the secret Donegal Corridor. This is the basic story of my search to find and place its precise location. But first, we need to look at the background story. To cover the North Atlantic area, regional headquarters for RAF Coastal Command was moved to Oban in Scotland. Operationally, however, Northern Ireland was better suited for the western approaches in that it was the most western part of the UK and had more favourable sites for its long-range amphibious aircraft. Having the largest lake in the UK, Lough was chosen for the early operations. But here a problem arose. For access to the western approaches meant that pilots first had to fly north beyond neutral Ireland's coastal waters before turning to the west. See map left. This diversion meant an additional 150 miles and more each way, just to get to and from the nearest patrol area. Ideally, from the British point of view, operations would be very much more favourable if the base was located in the second largest lake in the UK, Lower Lough Erne, as it was only a few miles to and from the west coast of Ireland. However, any Allied military forces crossing the Irish border would be in violation of the International Neutrality Act, of which, being neutral, Erne could justifiably claim to enforce. Prime Minister Winston Churchill had long feared a German invasion of the UK via the Irish Republic, but that did not prevent top-secret negotiations from taking place between the two governments regarding a narrow air zone over a few miles of Irish territory. To be fair to the Irish Prime Minister de Valera, he would have realised that an enemy invasion of the UK would have placed Erne as the next country on the German list for occupation, as would any Irish collaboration with the UK. It was an invidious decision for the Irish Taoiseach to make, for while he was no great friend of the UK, any leak of a top-secret agreement between the two nations would almost certainly bring about a German backlash, which, understandably, neither Prime Minister wanted. Notwithstanding the difficulties, an agreement was reached that gave both Britain and her allies access through Irish airspace via a very narrow corridor, with the conditions that pilots should not fly over, photograph or film the nearest Irish towns of Bundoran, Ballyshannon or the Irish Army camp nearby. International law required that neutral countries could only give humanitarian aid to belligerent forces, for example downed aircrews, along with the internment of all parties who found themselves stranded there with or without military intention. The flight path would potentially run from the border town of Ballyclare, Northern Ireland, and between the towns of Ballyshannon and Bundoran in Erne, bypassing the Irish Army camp at Fermanagh. To achieve accuracy meant having good navigator pilot skills and the implementation of the relatively new homing beacon system known as BABS. And it is here that our story really begins. It was only in recent years that information about Babs and the Donegal Corridor was officially released, this being a map of a radio beacon in an unspecified location close to Beleak. See my enhanced image right. Unfortunately, although quite detailed, hardly on this map was legible. Various details already known claim that the beacon was installed in a small mobile Morris van, but finding its precise location would be impossible without full coordinates. In any event, a single beacon in those days was likely to be of an omni type, whereby a pilot could tune into it from any direction to find it if he was in range. It may produce a homing signal from any compass bearing, but on its own wouldn't provide a pathway or entry point. There had to be other ground beacons elsewhere. In addition, there had to be suitable receivers in the aircraft. It took several years of further researches to discover that there were in fact at least 3 relay stations, one called a homer and one called a leader. Of the third I knew nothing, and the mobile vehicle location was, it seemed, unlikely ever to be found. Creating a paper-to-digital compass as accurately as possible, I traced the beams from the original and managed to find the correct questionable beam bearings easily enough, and initially estimated them to be 113 and 283 degrees inbound paths. What I didn't find straight away was the precise physical location of that central point, and without that my project in finding Babs was doomed. Some time later the Pullen map became available. See enhanced image near right. Viewed separately, one might be forgiven in thinking that this was a basic copy of the original, far right, as I initially thought. However, the western arm is clearly offset. It took me a long time to realise that this arm combination was actually providing a pathway, which meant that there had to be at least one other beacon. But where? Knowing little about how beacons work in such a scenario, I eventually found some details that, technically, were way above my head. But suddenly things got interesting. A prominent World War II enthusiast sent me photographs of what were understood to have been radio beacon housings, dating from the period and located in the wider Beleak area. Would they provide details that might make more sense to a complete radio beam novice? To maintain the individual owner's strict privacy, I've included just one of 3 photographs, this one right, located in the remote hills near Derrynacross, several miles from Beleak. One was located near Fermanagh, and another a few miles further away. The third one, at long last, was the elusive central beam location, the key to unlocking the path. By careful trial and error manipulation with my cut-out compass, the beams were now all lining up, more or less, the central point placed on the precise location of the main beacon housing. The question was whether it fitted in with all the requirements. Babs. Its full name is Blind Approach Beacon System and works via Morse code, both in inaudible form and visually via an oscilloscope, so that when in range, a pilot can hear and see the signal as shown in the diagram below. In essence, it was an early form of homing or non-directional beacon, or instrument landing system, similar to, though not quite as sophisticated as what pilots use today. In his current position above, the pilot will be receiving the Morse signals for A, then A plus N. If he follows his current heading and reaches the central path, he will receive all 4 signals, which he will hear as one long, continuous note, also shown on his oscilloscope as a straight, unbroken line. If he should stray beyond the continuous signal, he will get an opposing set of signals. In each case, he will know if he is too far left or right off course and adjust his heading. We'll look at this in two different ways. Inexperience in navigation often caused problems for young pilots and navigators. However, the Irish devised a simple but effective means of protecting aircraft from German raids, while at the same time providing aid to the Allies. All around the coastline they placed large signs with the word Erne and a 2-digit number. These numbered signs were issued to Allied pilots who, if lost, could fly along the coastline until they saw one. Its number showed the location on their charts, and from that they knew where they were and which way to fly to the location of the Bab's beam. Simple but ingenious. Quite a few of these signs can still be seen today. Deciphering the illegible figures in the original map left was largely guesswork, so creating, centering, orientating a compass below was a matter of trial and error. The eastern inbound arm set initially at 285 degrees, the western inbound arm at 085. The original figures appear to be 283 and 113, but probably with magnetic variation. The agreement conditions were to avoid the towns of Ballyshannon, Bundoran and the Army Camp. But even with my two variations shown, the flight path for the corridor, by my estimations, either passed over or were too close to at least one of them. But it was the Pullen map that would help clarify matters. I've left you a little time here to study the map as it's shown.